Okay, now I'm starting to record. Okay, thank you for reminding. All right, so Albert is still working. So at the beginning of year 16, the company is adopting the pension plan. So for the past 15 years, Albert worked for the company. The company calculates the prior service cost and then put it into OCI in year 16, and then at the beginning of year 16, and then amortize it for the remaining service years, which is 3 years. And also in number 1, we figured out how much the company has to save at the end of each year for the next 3 years to have enough saved by the end, by the time that Albert retires, so that the company has enough cash to pay Albert for his 18 years of service for 10 years of his retirement. So we calculated that, and in number 1, one thing was when we discount the future cash flows, we used the interest rate of 8%, which is the settlement rate, and then when we try to figure out how much the company has to save, and with a assumed growth rate of this investment at 10%. So in this case, we use the interest rate of 10%, and as a result, we figured out that the company has to save $25,344 at the end of 16, 17, and 18, 3 times. If they do, then at the end of 18, they will have 83,889. Okay, and then in number 2, we calculated pension expense, and in the pension expense, these things go into the pension expense: service cost, interest cost, and then return on plan asset. If that's positive, we subtract it. If it's negative, that increases the pension expense, and then amortize prior service cost. So everything added up, pension expense for year 16 is $26,938. And then in step 3, we calculated the ending PBO balance. So we introduced 2 different ways to calculate PBO. That beginning with the PBO balance adjusted by service cost, interest cost, benefits paid, and then if it's new, add the prior service cost, or you can do this method that we are using. All right, based on, in this case, let me see. This is at the end of year 16, so the company's total obligation for Albert will be based on Albert's 16 years of service. That's why we include 16 when we calculate the pension check, and then still the number of retirement check payments will be 10. Therefore, that's why we are using n equals 10. And then in here, today's date is December 31, 16. The time that we are calculating this for, that is December 31, 18. Therefore, we are discounting it back to 2 years. All right, in number 4, determine the December 31, 16 fair value of plan assets. So let me see, I didn't, so if you go back to the lecture note, then you will see that plan asset equals beginning plan asset plus minus actual return plus contributions minus benefits paid. So we will follow that. So let me see. Beginning plan asset, since they will start saving, how much was it? They will start saving $25,344 at the end of year 16. At the beginning of 2016 or year 16, the balance is 0. And then we add return on plan asset, beginning plan asset 0. Therefore, when we apply 10% return, that's still 0. And then contribution. This contribution is how much the company saves into the pension plan. So in number 1, we calculated that the company will make this $25,344 contribution toward the pension plan at the end of each year for the next 3 years. Therefore, our pension plan increases by this contribution of $25,344. So $25,344, and then Albert didn't retire this year, so benefits paid is 0. So it's basically plus and minus. Return on plan asset can be a negative if it's a negative return. Therefore, ending plan asset is $25,344. All right. Now, number 5, determine the funded status of the pension plan as of December 31, year 16. Funded status, if you have greater PBO or plan asset, that's the funded status. If you have greater liability, greater PBO, then your fund is underfunded. If your PA, plan asset, is greater than PBO, then your fund is overfunded. So, what is the PBO balance? Ending PBO, 63,933. That we calculated in number 3, and then ending plan asset balance, we just calculated that, 25,344. So underfunded or overfunded? Greater liability, therefore underfunded, yes. The pension is underfunded by 38,589. That's the difference. Questions so far? Now, this is posted on Blackboard. This is the pension worksheet, which will help us to prepare the journal entry for pensions. So the journal entry is shown on the bottom. So do you see right here? Journal entry, expense, cash, change in OCI for the prior service cost, change in OCI for gains or losses, and then change in pension asset or liability. Now, this column over here, this column, OCI for gains and losses, we will ignore that column because we are not incorporating or we are not learning the effect of changes in assumptions or the changes in interest rates. Therefore, we are skipping this column, OCI for gains and losses, but then we will use expense, cash, OCI, prior service cost, and pension asset or liability. All right. Now, and then on the right-hand side, we see 2 columns, PBO and plan asset. So PBO, plan asset, as we discussed earlier, they are not formal accounts used on the balance sheet. So what's reported is the net amount of these 2. So PBO, liability, plan asset, asset is net against each other, and the net amount is reported under the pension asset or liability. All right. Now let's look at these row headings. Beginning balance and then prior service cost if it is the first year. And then service cost. Service cost, as we know, is affecting expense, pension expense, as well as PBO. By the way, prior service cost, if we have prior service cost that affects the PSC, the prior service cost of which affects the OCI, and then interest cost affects pension expense as well as PBO. Expected return on plan asset affects pension expense as well as plan asset. Amortized prior service cost affects pension expense as well as OCI, right? By the amortization of prior service cost that gets out of prior service cost, so that comes out of OCI, and it increases the pension expense. All these rows we can ignore. Liability gain, from liability gain until amortized gains or losses. But then funding check, this is how much the company pays to the pension plan. In our previous case, that was like $25,000 some dollars. And then retirement check, this is how much the company pays out of the pension plan to the retiree. So retirement check will affect the PBO to go down, and then plan asset also to go down. And then after adding everything for each column, we get the balances for expense, cash, and then OCI, OCI prior service cost, and the pension asset or liability. That because they are balance sheet accounts, we will only journalize for the change. Okay, so this looks like a lot, but I think as we work on it, it will make more sense. Now let's go back to our problem. So number 6, record journal entry for 16. Number 7, repeat steps 2 through 6 for 17. Repeat steps 2 through 6 for year 18. Okay, so let's see. I'm not sure if I'll do all 3, but all right. So let's take a look at this. I'm not sure if you already have this Excel file on Blackboard. Probably not. If not, then I will also post this on Blackboard. So if you want to take notes, you can quickly write down these headings in your Excel file. So pension table for December 31, year 16. So let's start with this, the upper pension table. All right. For expense, we don't have any beginning balance. Prior service cost will just affect the OCI column. Let's start with the service cost. So in here, let me see if I have a way to show you the Word document along with the Excel. So if I share my desktop, are you seeing my desktop? Can you see well? Okay. Then This is the Word document. Okay. Okay. So service cost for pension expense, let me copy from here. Service cost is $3,999. Interest cost $4,440. Return on plan asset was 0. Amortized prior service cost $18,499. Those 4 things are that go into the pension expense. So ending pension expense is 26, or I can just do, let's do this. So service cost plus interest cost minus return on plan asset plus amortized prior service cost. Assuming that return on plan asset is positive, all right? So ending, so the balance for pension expense is $26,938. Now,
hey, Professor?
Yes.
Could you hover over that equation again, real quick?
Sure.
Thank you. Sure. Okay, thank you.
Now, the cash balance is the payment from the firm to the pension plan. How much are we paying each year? $25,344, right? So, by the way, cash balance for the whole company has beginning and ending balances, but what we are only concerned here is the payment for the pension fund. Therefore, this cash will be just one-time payment rather than like the transferred balance from the prior period. So cash payment, where should I put this? Funding check is $25,344. Then is it a negative or positive amount to the company?
Negative?
Negative, yes, negative, because the company pays and this amount is transferred from the company to the pension fund. Therefore, when we journalize this, we need to keep in mind that cash needs to be on the credit side. So, but then do I want, so let me not use the parenthesis or negative sign, because just remember that cash is on the credit side. Okay, and then for OCI prior service cost, we didn't have any beginning balance, right? Prior service cost, that was 0 at the beginning. However, let me see. Since this was the first year, we calculated the prior service cost. So we basically, this beginning balance refers to if we had any ending balance in the prior period. The answer to that question is no, therefore beginning balance, we will just put it as 0. But then the prior service cost, we calculated that in number 3, or was it number 3? No, number 1. Prior service cost was calculated in number 2 in the first step, and that was $55,498. So prior service cost that's recorded, that's added during the year or at the beginning of this year is $55,498. that basically reduces our other comprehensive income. So OCI stands for other comprehensive income, and it is still an income, even though it's not part of the income statement. So if it is an income, not a loss, then it will have a credit as a normal side, the OCI. But then if you think about it, this $55,498 is a total accumulated cost to the company to compensate Albert for his 15 years of service. Therefore, it makes your income go down in the equity section. Therefore, it has a debit balance. So this $55,498 is a debit to OCI prior service cost. When we record this OCI, what else increases? What else is affected? If I go to this right here, $55,498, that's the prior service cost that we calculate at the beginning of year 16. Yes, Lauren, thank you. That is basically the PBO balance, increase in PBO balance at that time. Therefore, when we debit $55,498, that simultaneously increased PBO balance by $55,498. If I do that, then I should have also included these things. So I'm going back and forth, but no, let me do this first. All right, and then how much did we amortize this prior service cost in year 1? Amortized prior service cost in the Word document right here. Amortized prior service cost per year, we calculated that to be $18,499. All right, that is to reduce this unamortized balance per year by $18,499. This is the total OCI that is debited at the beginning of the year, increasing the PBO balance at that time. However, our goal is to put this prior service cost in the other comprehensive income, and then over time we take it out of the equity section and put it into the pension expense through this amortized prior service cost. Therefore, at first, OCI has a balance of $55,498. We decrease it by $18,499 for this period, for year 16. Are we good? So this is basically a debit balance, and then we credit prior service cost, the amortized prior service cost by $18,499. Our ending balance becomes this minus this. Unamortized OCI is reduced down to $36,999. You may have noticed already, but each row is a journal entry. So in here, we debit OCI prior service. So for prior service cost, if it's new, we debit OCI prior service cost for $55,498, credit PBO for $55,498. Right here, for amortization of prior service cost, we debit pension expense for $18,499, credit OCI prior service cost for $18,499. Therefore, you can imagine for these things, we will see the other parts of the journal entry later shortly. However, I will not ask you to prepare the journal entries for everything else other than the actual journal entry that goes on to that will have an impact on, or that will go on to our book, right? The ending balances, right? However, it's useful to understand how each one of these journal entries eventually affect the actual journal entry, actual formal journal entry. So I believe in our chapter 17 folder, I have a sheet that says pension journal entries or journal entries. So if you understand it, if you are understanding everything here, then it will help. It will be helpful. But I think if it makes you more confused, then just don't take a look at it. It's okay. All right, now that we are done with the OCI, prior service cost, OCI, gains and loss. Let me delete that. Now, this pension asset or liability can only be obtained after we work on the PBO and PA ending balances. So we'll come back to plan asset or liability. PBO with prior service cost, if it's new, increases by 55,498. Service cost also increases our PBO balance, therefore 3,999. So another way to look at it is to see this over here, because we already put this information, we can infer from here. Interest cost also increases PBO balance, 4,440. Return on plan asset, that it's 0. Return on plan asset, so we'll come back, let me come back shortly. Now, and then the amortization of prior service cost doesn't affect the PBO. What this has anything to do with is the pension expense and then the OCI. And then funding check, that will also be about the plan asset. Then ending balance for, and then for, let me see. Oh, benefits paid, pension benefits paid was 0 for the period. So that will be 0. Oh, do I have it? Yeah, funding check is 0. Now then, not the funding check, but benefits paid, we don't see a case where benefits paid will be accounted later on. But now then, ending PBO balance will be prior service cost plus service cost plus interest cost. Now, plan asset. It started with 0 balance, and then return on plan asset, because beginning balance was 0, it's also 0. Let me put the 0 over here. And then amortization doesn't affect the plan asset. Funding check, the company pays how much? 25,344 each period for the next 3 years. Therefore, ending plan asset balance becomes if we had a beginning balance, that plus return plus funding check. Oh, by the way, let me go back here. So if we had a beginning balance, then that also should be included in the PBO balance. Now then, what's the plan asset or liability? That's the difference between PBO and plan asset, right? So liability balance of 593. That is, so remember that is a credit balance, plan asset or liability, because as we answered earlier, the company pension plan is underfunded by that amount. So the journal entry, let's figure out the journal entry. Journal entry will be debit to pension expense for 26,938, credit to cash for 25,344, and then for this OCI prior service cost, what do you think? For these two things, so for these two things, since they are balance sheet accounts, we will journalize the change for the year. Change for the year, then for OCI prior service cost, started with the 0, ended with 36,999. By the way, this 36,999, is that a debit or credit? What was this? 55,498 for OCI, was it a debit or a credit? Yes, it is a debit. Yeah, it's basically a loss recognized in the OCI section, in the equity section with the OCI account. So this 36,999, so the loss recognized in the OCI is reduced by the amortized prior service cost, but it is still a loss. Therefore, the change is debit to 36,999 because the debit balance basically increased from 0 to 36,999. Plan asset or liability, it started with 0, and the change here is from 0 to 38,593. And is it a debit or credit balance? As we discussed, it's a credit balance. So maybe I should show this minus this minus this. We are only accounting the change. So this ending minus beginning. Therefore, journal entry for 16 will be debit to pension expense for 26,938 OCI prior service cost 36,999 credit cash 25,344 credit plan asset or liability 38,593. questions so far? Yes, I will post the Excel file along with the Word doc on when I upload the recording. Okay. Sure. Now let's do year 17. So pension table for December 31, year 17. Let me copy the headings and then beginning balance, right? So for expense and cash, that will be just zero. Expenses on income statement account, cash is we always only account for the payment of 2533.44. So that will be just nothing in there. But OCI, PAL, so plan asset or liability, PBL, and plan asset, we had these ending balances. Therefore, these ending balances become the beginning balances for the following year. So do I need, what is this? Let me just copy. 38, or this is this, and this here is this. So now let me just share the Excel file. How do you want to start this? If you have this Excel file in front of you and if it is asking you to prepare the journal entry for year 17, how would you start this problem? So what's different from the previous year? Now we have this OCI prior service cost, plan asset or liability, PBL, plan asset, beginning balances. Now, starting with the pension expense, don't you think we need to do the service cost for year 17? Yeah? Service cost for year 17. Pension check. Is it still 2%? 2%. And then just for year 17. So for 1 year. And then final salary, I have it somewhere. Final salary is 34,729. I don't have the answer in front of me, so let me calculate that. That is 695. Well, we must have had it earlier. Now then, what do? We do the first present value at retirement calculation, where discount rate is 8%. Number of periods, the first present value calculation, this N is the number of retirement check paid. How many retirement checks will Albert get? Oh. 9, 10, 8, how many? The assumption that Albert is, why is it 9? I see some people say 9, but why is it 9? The fact that Albert will live for 10 years, it's not a fact, but the assumption that Albert will live 10 years in his retirement doesn't change. We didn't talk about the case where our assumptions, actuarial assumptions change. Therefore, in the first present value calculation, the number of periods that goes into the present value calculation is always the number of retirement check paid. Therefore, 10. And then the payment is $695. Then present value, I must have this, right? Because that sounds familiar. It's 4664. Second, present value at time t, I equals 8%. Now, n equals what? Thank you, Stephanie. This time, we are discounting 4664 at December 31, 18 back to when? December 31, 17. Therefore, n equals 1. From December 31, 18 to December 31, 17. Just 1 year. Therefore, future value is 4664. Then present value, can somebody tell me? Is it 4318? Oh, 19, okay. 4319. Okay. Then that's the service cost. Service cost increases pension expense, and what else does it increase? PBO, awesome. So 4319. Good. Pension expense debited for 4319, PBO credited for 4319. Moving on to interest cost. Interest cost calculation is simple. Beginning PBO, 63,937 multiplied by the settlement rate. Where are you going, Chelsea? Trying to take the class outside. Yeah, the weather is super nice today. All right, so interest cost 63,937 multiplied by the settlement rate of 8%, right? So that is 63,937 multiplied by 8%, 5115. Let me know if it's not right. So far, so good? Okay. Then interest cost, 5,115. What else does it increase again? Oh, okay. Dog was bothering you? Yes, interest cost increases, not just the pension expense, but also the PBO. So 5,115 credited for PBO. Return on plan asset, let's take a look at this one. Return on plan asset. Return on plan asset, we can calculate it easily. Take the beginning plan asset balance, which is 25,344, multiply that by expected rate of return, not the discount or settlement rate. Expected rate of return is given at 10%. So this is how much our investment will grow. This is how much we expect our investment to grow. This is the rate that we want our investment to grow. Therefore, not the discount rate, but the expected rate of return is used when we calculate the return on plan asset. So 10%, that's 2,534. This one, now we have a positive return. When we have a return that much, we don't have put into our pension. Therefore, that helps us save some money because we have a positive return. And as a result, our expense goes down. Therefore, return on plan asset, let me use the parentheses to show the negative in here, 2,534. Then return on plan asset by the amount of 2,534 decreases pension expense, but what else does it increase? Or what else does it affect? Plan asset, right? That your plan asset increases by the reinvestment return. All right. Now then, amortized prior service cost is the same as prior year because we use the straight line amortization. Therefore, 18,499. That increases the pension expense, which comes out of the OCI balance. Therefore, maybe I should use the negative sign. Useful. All right, so that reduces our OCI, or should I? Oh, that changed. No, let me keep it this way. Okay. Amortized prior service cost makes our, so that increases our pension expense, but that also reduces our OCI balance. So let me put that over here and keep in mind that by this much, we are amortizing the OCI balance. So that will reduce. Now then, what else? What else can you think of? Funding check doesn't affect the expense, but cash will be changed. Cash is reduced by the payment that we are making, which is 25,344. By that much, our plan asset increases 25,344. So over here, this is debit to plan asset, credit to cash for 25,344. Now then, are we ready to get the ending balances? Yeah? Think so? Then ending balance for pension expense, it will be just the sum because I use that negative sign in front of the return, right? And then that will be just this. Remember, this check over here for cash is credit to cash. And then OCI prior service cost, it starts with 36,999. We amortized it by 18,499. Amortize, meaning decrease the value by 18,499. Therefore, ending OCI balance will be 18,500. So we have a rounding error. But in the following year, when we amortize it once more, then OCI prior service cost balance will go down to 0. So at the end of the year, it is 18,500. And then plan asset or liability, let's take a look at this. PBO, so once we calculate ending balances for PBO and plan asset, we take the difference and that will become the ending plan asset or liability balance. So PBO balance starts with this beginning balance and then increases with the service cost and interest cost. PBO, does anything else goes in there? Let me confirm. PBO, beginning PBO, service cost, interest cost, benefits paid, we didn't pay anything there, and total prior service. So benefits paid will be the payment that comes out of the pension plan to the employee. In this case, we only have the contributions made by the firm, from the firm to the pension plan. Therefore, benefits paid is 0. And then total prior service cost, if new, that goes into the PBO balance, but the total prior service cost has already taken into consideration in year 16 when it was new. Therefore, we don't have that. Therefore, this is the ending PBO balance. Ending plan asset balance will be beginning balance plus return plus additional contribution. Therefore, the ending plan asset or liability, we are still underfunded because the liability is greater than asset by underfunded by 20,149. But do you see this plan asset or liability? The liability balance decreased, right? So if the liability balance decreases, then we'll put that on the debit side. So journal entry for expense, we'll just do this. For cash, it will be, so debit to pension expense for 25,399, credit to cash for 25,344, and then right here, it's the change ending minus beginning. That 18,499 negative, what does that tell us? Is it a debit side on the debit side or a credit side? First of all, the 36,999, the beginning OCI balance, did it have a debit side, a debit balance? Was it a debit balance or a credit balance? That was a debit balance, 36,999. This was a debit balance, right? OCI, that's the loss that we put into the OCI. And then we reduce that loss by this amount. How do you reduce the loss? By crediting it. Therefore, the change that happened for OCI, that is the credit balance. Okay. And as Courtney responded earlier. Now, plan asset, change, we also journalize the change. It has 18,444. Liability decreased. Therefore, we will, by the way, then Do you think it'll be a debit or credit? Debit balance. Yes. So I think there is no really one fits all debit or credit in this case. I think we should go through the thought process and then try to journalize it. So let me see. Let us make sure if it balances. So pension expense debited for 25,399. Cash credited for 25,344. And then credit OCI prior service cost for 18,499. Debit plan asset or liability for 18,444. Yes, it balances. So that will be the journal entry for year 17. Questions? All 3 years, probably not. For the exam, we don't have enough time, so I'll just pick 1 year and then ask you to do it. Not 3 consecutive years. All right, why was OCI PSC debited in year 16 but credited in year 17? Good question. All right, so always what doesn't change is for OCI prior service cost, as well as plan asset or liability, we journalize the change like any other balance sheet accounts. So when you go back to year 16, so to answer your question in a simple phrase, the debit and credit side changed because in year 16, since it was the first year and we didn't have a beginning balance of OCI at that time. However, in year 2, we have a beginning balance, right? So in year 1, in year 16, the change was from 0 to a debit balance of 36,999. Okay, so this was changed from 0 to debit 36,999. And then for the 17, it was changed from debit 36,999 to a debit 18,499. What did I do? beginning balance. Let me see. By the way, oh, okay. So do you see that in year 16, so from the zero balance to a debit, we had to debit to carry that OCI in the first place. And in year 17, the balance dropped from 36,999 to another debit 18,499. So to reduce that loss from 36,999 to a loss of 18,499, we have to credit the change. Lauren, did I answer your question? Okay, good. All right. Any other questions? The quiz gonna be based on this problem. Yes, quiz can be anything that we covered so far on chapter 17. Okay, how did I get 2149 for plan asset? Oh, so this one is the difference between ending PBO and plan asset balances. Okay. All right. I have extra problem so that's basically the same problem for Sally. In there, however, the final salary is just given. We don't have to calculate that. I will just post the solution for your extra practice. So I think this extra problem has at least 2 pension tables. So are we allowed to use Excel for the quiz? For the quiz, you can use a blank Excel file, but for the quiz, I don't think I will ask like a really comprehensive problem. So I don't think you will need an Excel file. So is OCI prior service card normally a debit or credit balance? So OCI, like any other income, OCI is an income account. So it has a credit as a normal side. However, for prior service cost, since it's the cost to the company, the prior service cost, when we first carry it, it's a huge loss recognized in the OCI. Therefore, it starts with the loss side, debit side. So debit over here, OCI in year 16, and credit over here, PBO. Debit and credit. Any other questions? All right, then have a great spring break, even though we all are gonna stay home, right? Find a special feeling from your kitchen or living room, all right? And we'll see you after the spring break with the quiz, okay? And we'll start chapter 20. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Sure.
Thank you. I'll leave the room. You guys are free to hang
Thank
out in here.